My name is Erica Sickles, and I am a registered mental health counselor intern, and I am also the coordinator of our school counseling program at Lutheran Counseling Services. And today we are doing our webinar to reach out to parents and really provide some helpful parenting tips and tricks using Dan Siegel's work, and many of you may be familiar with him. So I'll show you here a little bit of our school counseling staff. And we're lucky to be in a number of area schools, counseling students, providing mental health services, individual counseling, group counseling, teacher support, and even parent education. And so that brings us to the purpose of our training and our webinar this afternoon. And so we're going to be joined by our panelist, Sharon Darren, who is a licensed mental health counselor and a member of our school counseling team. She works with children, adolescents, adults, couples, and families to address anxiety, communication, and conflict resolution, depression, grief, learning concerns, relationship distress, and trauma. Her therapeutic approach includes cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused therapy, family systems therapy, play therapy, mindfulness, and EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. As a counselor, Sharon draws on her life experiences as a dancer, sister, daughter, mother, and wife. She believes the path to wholeness lies within ourselves, and she has learned people are hardwired to be in relationships with others. Counseling sessions are collaborative with a focus on identifying and nurturing client strengths and resources to create positive change. Sharon sees clients in our Winter Park, Oviedo, and Winter Garden offices, as well as part of our school counseling program. So today she joins us to present tips and tricks for parents based on Dan Siegel's book, The Whole Brain Child, 12 Revolutionary Strategies to Nurture Your Child's Developing Mind.
So good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to start today with our seminar, which is called Parenting and Emotional Intelligence, which I think if you're listening, what's going on in the news and maybe even in your schools, emotional intelligence is all the buzzwords. So they're using it in the workplace. We're doing growth mindsets in schools. And that's what our focus today is, just to figure out how we can use that to be better parents, right? So we're going to start off with a quote. So read along with me. So nothing really changes, or does it? Our youth now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders, love chatter in place of exercise. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents. They chatter before company. They gobble up the food and tyrannize their teachers. So I'm wondering, who do you suppose this is quoted from? Yeah, it's Socrates from the 5th century BC. So we think that nothing really changes, or does it? We're a different society today, but we've got the same concerns Socrates had so many, many years ago. And I think part of our struggles this day has to do with all the IT that our kids are connected with, right? So they've got their tablets, and they've got their phones, and they've got chat boxes, and social media has just changed our world. It's not only changed our kids' worlds, it's changed our worlds. And so we want to figure out how to reach our kids the same way Socrates wanted to reach the kids way back then. So the parenting challenge is not to survive, but to thrive. And what does that mean? I mean, there are days that we get out of bed and we try to get the kids dressed and out at the door, and they have to have breakfast, they have to have their backpacks, they have to have lunch, and we have to get ready for work or whatever else we've got on our schedule. And that's all we can do to get there on time. And that's surviving, and we all do that. But let's take a breath, because we want better for that, right? We want our kids to thrive. We want to thrive as parents. We want our families to thrive. So if you stop and think, what are your goals for your children? You want them to have meaningful relationships. You want them to do their best in school, to be respectful, to be caring and compassionate, be content and confident in themselves. And so those survive moments where we're just trying to get out the door on time can become overwhelming. But we can also use those points to model the behavior that we want our kids to learn. So sometimes we forget what the kids do and don't know. What did we learn that? You know, there's studies out there that show, okay, by a certain time we should be crawling, and then we're going to start talking, and then maybe we'll walk. But when do we learn the things that go on in our brain? What has changed over the years is science, and it allows us to understand how the brain works a little bit more than it did back in Socrates' time, right? So we want to utilize those skills and knowledge and build upon that. So just for an example, I want to tell you a story. And the book we're basing so much of this on today is Dan Siegel's The Whole Brain Child. And if you haven't read it, I really encourage you to do that. He's got wonderful stories in there, and I'm going to share them because we've all got our own stories, right? And I hope that we have people out there that have questions, and we'd love to include those as we go along and address that, because I think as much as I can sit here and tell you all the things that I've read, you're living life, and your contribution will make this discussion so much richer. So the stories that I shared are in Dan Siegel's book, but you have your own stories that you want to share and you want to understand. And so if you have a question that comes up along the way, please, we've got a chat going on. We'll take time to address those questions as we go. So one day there was a mom, she was at work, and she got a call from the daycare from her 2-year-old son. And the babysitter had come and picked him up, and on the way home, they had gotten in a car accident. So the mom was frantic, and she rushed out the door, and she went to the scene. And the little boy was there, and a fireman was trying to comfort him, and he was just sobbing over and over and over. So mom did the smartest thing. She just got down on his level. She put her arms around him, and she just hugged him. And she just tried to calm him down. And he just kept saying, "Eewoo, eewoo." And on his language, what he was saying is his babysitter's name was Sophia, and an ambulance had taken her away, and he was so scared. So again, we're going to learn today how the brain goes offline, the emotions take over, and all ability to talk and reason goes out the door. Now at 2 years old, he doesn't have that ability yet, because when we're born, we don't have the possibility of logical thinking. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is integrating the very, very many pieces of our brain. So we're going to talk about what is brain integration and why does it matter. So I think we've heard an awful lot. There's the right brain and the left brain. There's the artistic brain and there's the scientific brain. We're going to talk about what that means, but I want to also say there's an upstairs brain and there's a downstairs brain. And when we put all those together, it's kind of like when a choir comes together, an orchestra, right? You've got the sopranos and the tenors, and you've got the bass, and they all come together, and you've got beautiful melody. But if one doesn't work, if someone hits a wrong note, or they miss their cue, and then you've got this awful sound, and that's what happens in our brain. And we want to try to figure out what our kids know in their brain. How's that functioning at their age? So at 3 years old, when we're born, our emotions are functioning. That's the right brain. But the left brain, it takes time. And then we want to have the upstairs and the down brain, because the upstairs brain is executive function, and that comes on much later. We find out now through studies that our brain is not fully functioning until we're 25. So when our 2-year-old is having a tantrum, And we want them to calm down. We can't figure out why they can't figure it out. Just stop crying. What's the matter with you? They can't. They're totally flooded with their emotions. And we're going to talk about how we can help them integrate that. So our brain continues to grow throughout our lifetime. And, you know, the studies are out there now that even as we age from 30 to 40 to 50 to 80, the more we can stay active and we can learn new things and stay engaged with people, our brain continues to evolve. It's plastic and it's changing with our experiences, and that's where we want to just help our children have the best experiences possible. So you've heard this quote, I'm sure, neurons that wire together, fire together. So we're going to go back to the little boy that was at the preschool. His name was Marco. And he couldn't get calmed down, and every time he heard a siren, he got really upset all over again. And what his mom had the good sense to do was allow Marco to retell his story over and over and over. So we talked about the sirens going off, and Mom said, okay, so you were in a car accident, yes. And he would say, Iya, and he was talking about his caregiver. And yep, Sophia was in a car accident with you, and the ambulance took her to the hospital. And they would talk about that. And then Sophia got out of the hospital, and she was the caregiver. And now Sophia's better, and she's with you, and everybody's okay. Marco had to tell that story repeatedly, and he only had bits and pieces of it. And Mom had to help fill those stories in, so that every time he heard an ambulance, he didn't immediately panic and start crying again. She helped him to integrate the right brain with the left brain. And as we grow up, the experiences that we have play a major role. The music that we hear, the people that we love, the books we read, all of that comes into play. And as parents, we play a really, really important part. And the goal, when this is all said and done, according to Dan Siegel, which is visual, I just love it, right? You're in the river and you're floating in the middle of the stream. You've got chaos on one side and you've got rigidity on the other side, but our goal is to float peacefully down the river of life. And it kind of reminds me of going to the Wakaiva Springs, and you're in your tube and you can float from one side to the other side, and you're bouncing off either side, or the person in front of you just trying to get you back on track. And eventually we do that, and that's what we're trying to get our brains to do as well. So there are two sides of the brain we're going to start out with. There's the left brain and the right brain. And the left brain is referred to as the 4 L's. And it makes sense because, of course, they start with L because that's our logical side. It's logical, it's literal, it's linear, and it's where the language comes from. And it desires order. Contrasted with the right side, which is autobiographical, emotional, experiential. It's big picture. It's nonverbal. It's where our body language comes from. And it's without it, if you don't integrate the left side and the right side, it's trying to go down that river in a canoe with one paddle. It's not going to work. So our job as parents is to help them integrate the left brain and the right brain. There's a really cute story in the book. There's a mom, she's having a birthday party for her son. She's all excited. You know, she goes to Publix or whatever bakery she prefers. And she orders, you know, a chocolate cake, and let's put balloons on it, and let's have the balloons be red and blue, and let's put JP on it, because that's whose birthday it is. And so she goes back to get the birthday cake, and the baker has been very literal when he listened to how she ordered that cake. And she picked up this beautiful cake, and in the middle of it, it says, put JP on it, because that's what they heard. And so we have to engage our right brain and our left brain. And it's funny when you think about that story, but can you imagine the chaos that was going on in Mom's brain when she went to pick up this most perfect cake for her son's birthday, and that showed up. So that's what's going on in our kids' brains. So let's think how we can do that. So the right brain is what's online when we're born, right? If you think about a baby, our head only has so much room to get out of the birth canal to come out. So we've got to make, the brain hasn't fully developed and the emotions are working. Those are dominant from the age of birth to 3 years of age. Children don't talk, they don't have logic, they live in the moment. They're intuitive and emotional. They're picking up on the facial expressions, the eye contact, the tone of voice, postures, gestures, all of the stuff that's going on. They're interested in the spirit of the law. They live in the moment. You can tell your 2-year-old, let's clean up, we're going to get going, and they're lost, right? They have no idea what you're talking about with time and responsibility. We've got to get out the door. They don't care because their brain's not there. They're just in the moment having a great time, and we have to learn to understand that. And as they get older, we're going to help them understand why we need to get going. But right now, they're having so much fun, they can't listen to and be responsible and aware of time. The left brain is totally different. It loves the letter of the law. It's very, very specific. That's where that put that JP on the cake comes in. They're going to do exactly what you said. It's like you said, sister and brother are playing, brother and sister get in an argument. You ask him, why did you shove your sister? I didn't shove her, I pushed her. It sounds the same, but that's so literal. He didn't mean to shove her out of the way. He just pushed her a little bit. What's the problem? When they start asking why, then we know that the left brain is starting to work. And that's what we want them to do. So one of the first tips that Dan Siegel mentions is connect and redirect. And so what, if you think back to Marcos, and he's at the scene of the accident, and mom comes in, and the first thing she does is she tries to connect her right brain to Marcos' right brain. She tells him, she notices that he's upset, and she just really lets him know she understands how he's feeling, and she just comforts him. She validates, she's present with him, she uses her body language to calm him down. And when he's calmed down, then she can start to engage his left brain and allow him to re-story and tell what he remembers and how it happened. And she can fill in the gaps because he doesn't have that ability yet. As our kids get older, we help them to re-story it. So I think right now, there's a lot of studies out there that tell us that empathy in society is really missing. And you've heard the saying that windows are the soul, are the avenue to our soul. And we're so busy connecting to our telephones or our screens that we're not looking in people's eyes. And there is actually studies that have been done that when you look in one another's eyes, it helps to increase empathy. And there's a chemical in the brain, oxytocin, that is released. And that's like the cuddle chemical. It's like when you touch somebody. It's when you hug somebody. It's when you're in their presence. It promotes empathy. It promotes connection and trust. And we want to start there. When your children are upset, you want to start with connecting with them through eye contact. And then your body language is going to be so important. So if we go back to Marcos, mom comforted him, and then she allowed him to tell her what she knew and to re-story it. So there's another story in the book about a 7-year-old. He's supposed to be going to bed, and he doesn't want to go to bed, and mom puts him to bed, and 10 minutes later he's up, and he's all upset. And she's like, she's frustrated. She wants him to be in bed. What's going on? And he has totally gone off the rails. His right brain and his left brain are not integrated. The only thing working right now is his right brain, and he goes off. You never leave me a note in the middle of the night. You don't love me. My birthday is 7 months away, and my little brother gets more love than I do. And she like looks at him, and she has no idea what he's talking about. But she's got the good sense to calm him down and say, it sounds to me like you're really upset right now. And she hugs him, and then she validates, and she says, I never thought about leaving you a note at night. If you'd like me to do that, I could do that. And your birthday is just 7 months away, but we could start planning your birthday party. And she talks him through all these things. But the bottom line is, his old homework was overwhelming to him. And he spends so much time doing homework that he doesn't have time to play. When they got around to figuring that out, then they could talk about how they could live life differently in the morning. But right now, let's go back to bed. And he went back to bed, and that was better, right? The visual that I can think of is like the lifeguard that's going to rescue you in the ocean. He doesn't swim out to you and say, "What were you thinking? There's a tide's coming in. I told you not to go this far. Yada yada yada." Instead, he rescues you, takes you back to the shore, and then instructs you the next time, let's don't swim out so far. So our kids are doing the same thing. Their brains are on overload and they're out of control, and we have to comfort them. And once we've comforted them, then we can bring the left brain online. So we're connecting with them, and then we're redirecting, but we can't redirect until we've connected. I'm wondering if any of you have any questions that you want to jump in here. If you do, please do that, and we can stop and come back to them, or we can keep going. Okay. So we're going to call, the next tip is called Name It to Tame It. This is in Dan Siegel's book, The Whole Brain Child. But earlier this week, I was at a seminar for adults and how to help us connect as couples. And it was so funny to me. I'm sitting in this seminar of professors and counselors and all these adults, and Name It to Tame It comes up on the screen. And it works for children, it works for adults, and it's the same idea. When the right brain is taking over, we can't think logically. So the idea is when you're totally upset, you need to identify what's going on in your brain. If you can at least focus on what you're feeling, then you can start to tame that brain and call the emotions back online and figure out logical thinking. So there was another story, and the 10-year-old was going to go out for a bike ride. But then he got really scared, and he didn't want to go for a bike ride. And his friends were waiting with him, and Mom says, well, what's going on? You always love to ride your bike. And he was really, really scared. And it took him a long while to get around to telling Mom that he remembered the last time he rode his bike, he fell off and he skinned his knee, and it hurt really bad. And so she reminded him that he had not been paying attention, right? So she reminded him that he was having so much fun, but he was waving goodbye to her, and there was a sewer in the middle of the road, and he tripped over the sewer, the bike stumbled, and he fell down, and he got hurt. So she talked him through it, how next time when you're riding your bike, just pay attention and examine the road and keep your focus there, and everything will be safe. And he was fine. He went off to play. So sometimes when we're talking with our kids and we ask them what's going on, they can't stop in that moment and tell us, this is what's happening, this is how I'm feeling. So it's better sometimes if we can do it while we're playing. Or, I remember the ride home from school was just the best time, because we're doing other things and we're just back and forth, and the conversation flowed really easy. It wasn't like a cross-examination. So it's better to do it when you're playing or actions that so I have a question.
Type in
left brain and the when the upstairs brain.
We might be having audio. Okay, our audio cut out there for just a second, so we'll back up a little bit.
Okay, so under construction, we've got the downstairs brain. That's where we're totally just functioning. We've got the breathing, we've got fight or flight. That's where our survival modes are downstairs. But upstairs is our thinking. That's where we do our thinking. We control our bodies. That's where we learn how to play. That's where we develop empathy. And that's just a process up until the time we're 25. And in middle school, it goes through a remodel stage. But I came across this really cute comic that kind of explains what's happening when we're not working. Our right brain, our top brain is not integrated with the bottom brain. It's like, my whole problem is my lips move when I think. So that happens, right? We always want to think before we speak, and sometimes we just can't even do that yet. And it's good to know when that's possible. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. Okay, so think about your house. If you've got a 2-story house, the downstairs house is where you live, right? That's where your kitchen is. That's where your living room is. You've got a bathroom down there. That's where you do the basic living. And that is kind of like the downstairs brain. That's where we breathe. That's where we blink. That's where our emotions are. The amygdala is housed in the downstairs brain. And remember, that came online at birth. And we tried to control our emotions. But the upstairs brain is the second floor. It's like in your house, maybe you have a library, or maybe you just have skylights, but that's where you can see things more clearly. The upstairs brain, it gives us a bigger picture. It allows us to plan ahead. It talks about consequences, or to consider consequences, to manage impulsivity. It's the big picture. That's where empathy starts, is in the upper brain. And if it's not online, then we have no empathy. We can't understand other people's feelings. We can't understand the big picture. Or if we do this, this action will happen. The consequences are not there. So the upstairs brain starts coming online up until middle school age. And then in middle school, it goes through a total remodel. So you think about your child, and all of a sudden they're in 6th grade or 7th grade. I'm not sure when that happens. All of a sudden, our kids are different, right? But all of a sudden, it's like, where did my baby go? Why are you so angry? What's going on? And that upstairs brain is getting a remodel, and it's going to continue to be under construction until they're 25 years of age. Think about it. If you've got a 2-story house, you put a baby gate up so that the kids can't go upstairs before they're ready, right? If they don't know how to climb the stairs or come up or come down. So we put a baby gate up, and sometimes our emotions overwhelm that baby gate, and we just go out of control. There's a 3-year-old that wants a popsicle. There's a box full of popsicles. His favorite is the orange popsicle. And that's the only kind we don't have left. And so he is just screaming for a popsicle. I want an orange popsicle, over and over and over. And what has happened is he's totally lost track of the fact that there are other popsicles that he can have, and mom's trying to reason with him. Of course, we've got other popsicles here. Let's have a grape one. Oh, you always like the cherry. But his emotions are not allowing anything logical to come into his head. And so that's kind of called flip your top, or flip my lid. And you can't function there until, again, we're going to connect and redirect. So we have to acknowledge, I know you really like orange popsicles, and I know you're sad about that. And when they can calm down enough to hear you, you can propose that they have a different kind of popsicle. Sometimes we have to change our setting. We're going to go outside and play instead of having a popsicle. We just have to kind of work with that until they're calmed down. So if everyone could do this with me, your hand is like a model of the brain. And so if you take it and you fold your thumb in across your palm, that represents the amygdala. And again, that was functioning at birth, and it continues to function forever. And the idea is that we want to learn to help integrate that with the upstairs brain, which is our fingers. And if you think about folding those fingers down and tucking it in over the thumb, that's your thinking brain. And that's when we're integrating the upstairs brain with the downstairs brain. And when the orange popsicles are all gone and we're screaming bloody murder, the fingers go up and the emotions are going wild and crazy. And you can tell there's no thinking brain going on. So if you think about tucking those fingers back and around the thumb and protecting the thumb, it's helping the emotions to understand what's going on. So that's, again, we've got to connect and redirect. Also, if we can name it to tame it, we can say, oh, you're so upset that I can tell that you're really sad that there's no popsicles that are orange. Again, that's just engaging the upper thinking and taking it back out of the amygdala and helping that child to calm down. It helps us make good decisions. But again, that integration is what's so important. So the other one, another tip that he has is engage, don't enrage. This story kind of talks about, is really funny. I'm sure if you ever take your children out to dinner and they get upset and you just know that all eyes are on you in the restaurant, or if you're in church in the pew and the pastor's trying to preach and your child is talking to you or screaming at you, whatever's going on, you feel like the whole focus is on you. But what we want to do in that moment is we want to engage with our child, and it's really important to understand where we're coming from. So mom and dad were out to dinner with their little 4-year-old, and he ordered a quesadilla, and he told him what they wanted for dessert right off the bat, and dad said, well, we're not going to order dessert until you eat half of your quesadilla, and then we'll order dessert. Well, the 4-year-old got totally upset, ran away from the table, and stood across the room next to the pillar. You can imagine the parents. They're sitting at the table, wondering what they're going to do and how they're going to not make this a terrible scene. And so mom calmly got up and went over to her son, and she engaged with him. She acknowledged what he was feeling, that he was really upset, and that didn't seem like it was fair, and got him to talk about what he was feeling. And then she said, well, you know, Daddy's usually pretty reasonable. What do you think would be fair? And he thought about it. I'm going to eat 10 bites, and then I'm going to get dessert. She said, well, when you're ready to tell Daddy that, come on back to the table. Well, the funny thing was 10 bites really finished the quesadilla, and it wasn't half it at all. But he was in charge. And it maybe sounds like we're negotiating, and we're not. We're just engaging with the child and giving them some control in the situation. But in doing that, we're helping them to learn how to resolve conflicts. We're helping them to make decisions. We're helping with problem solving. We're engaging that upper brain, and we're starting to integrate it. Do we have any questions?
No questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can write it in the question area. You could also raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we can unmute you if you'd like to speak a question or ask it that way.
Okay. The next tip that Dan Siegel talks about is use it or lose it. And I kind of changed it up a little bit. It's called use it, move it, or lose it. At a very young age, our children can learn to make decisions, and we can help them with that just as much as young as 3 or 4. We give them choices about what they're going to. You want to wear the white shoes today or the blue shoes? Do we want to go to the soccer game or the birthday party? Those are for the older kids when they're trying to figure out. Our kids are so busy and they want to do everything, right? But we want to help them understand how their brain works, and we want to give them that opportunity to know that they love to play soccer, but their best friend's having a birthday party, and they really can't be in two places at one time. So we want to help them decide which one they're going to make, that decision, to give them alternatives and let them make that choice, because then they have ownership, right? They can start to figure out what's good for them, what's fair. They can help to understand if you don't go to that baseball team, if you don't go to the game, then your team will be missing you. And you can start to develop empathy and what role do you play there. And it's so important to help them figure out how they can make their own stories. There's a story that Dan tells in the book that this young girl, she's 9 or 10, and she's going off to an overnight camp, and she's concerned about being homesick, but she doesn't want to say it, so she's kind of shut down. And I don't know, I think Dad's kind of worried about her going away for the first sleepover too, and so he tries to engage her in talking about that, and he asks her, what could happen when you go to camp? And she talks about making new friends, and then she talks about maybe nobody will talk to her. She'll talk about maybe she'll miss her family. And so he brainstorms with her different ways that she can get over being homesick. And so they talk about, he leaves it up to her to figure it out. And she says, you know, maybe I could write letters. And so they brainstorm that. And he says, well, what would you need to do that? And so they put together letters, paper and envelopes and stamps. And he also talks about when she gets upset, maybe she could journal. She could write it in her book. And there are a lot of studies out there that show if we can take what we're feeling in our brain and put it on paper, we can restore it, we can take it out of our mind, we can read it, we can make sense out of it. And it actually, the studies show that it calms our heart rate. It actually is better for our health when we can journal. I know we talked about having diaries as children, and there really is some science behind why that's a good thing to do. So again, when she's at camp and maybe she's homesick, Dad takes her back to asking her to think about what's going on, what she's missing. And so he might ask her to think about identifying her emotions. If she's feeling so lonely, to identify that and then to figure out what she can do when she's upset. When we have children that are upset and they're angry, we want to give them an option of how to calm down, right? We want them to be able to identify that emotion, and then we want to give them a way to redirect that anger. And so oftentimes we tell them to take a deep breath, and that's hard. In the moment, that's the last thing we want to think about doing. So those are things that we can practice doing daily, just calming down. Make it a part of your everyday ritual. Also counting. How many times is it? Let's just count to 10. And that really does work, because remember that slide that said the neurons that fire together wire together. If we can learn that when we're upset, last time I did this, I took 3 deep breaths and it worked, right? Or last time when I was upset, I just counted to 10. I had a little boy tell me the other day, I'm just going to think about puppy dog clouds when I get mad. Mm-hmm. And that was so visual. But as soon as we were talking about emotions and we identified what he was feeling, he could put a word on it. And when he said he was mad, he remembered that puppy dog cloud helped him to calm down. So that's what we want to do. We want to get those neurons firing together, helping them to identify what they're feeling, and then remembering how to calm them down. So when we're born, there are memories, and we have implicit memories and we have explicit memories. And the implicit memories we do without thinking. Those are the only kind of memories we have until we're about 1.5 years old, actually. So there's stories out there that your baby can hear music when she's still in the womb or he's in the womb. You can read stories to them. There was a study that was done, and a father sang the same song to his child throughout the time the mom was pregnant. And then the baby was born, and he wanted to prove his point to a colleague. Of course, it was a professor, right? And so they came over, and he sang a song that he had never sung before, and the baby listened and liked the song. But when he sang the song that he had sang the whole time the baby was in the womb, her eyes lit up and got wider, and her face smiled, and that implicit memory came forward. And that's, we want to help our children with their implicit memories, but then we also want to help them build those explicit memories based on their experiences. So sometimes, I don't know, I would ask my kids, how was your day? Fine. What'd you learn? Nothing. And kids are like that, right? We have to engage them where they are. That's where coming back to the car ride on the way home, or while you're making dinner, or sometimes, you know, give me your high and your low. What was the best thing about today? What was the hardest thing about today? But getting them to fill in the blanks and tell their story the way they wanted to. Sometimes we get stuck in that implicit memory. We remember what happened and we forget everything else. Little boy was it was time for Pinewood Derby. And Dad was really excited. You know, he went out and bought the wood, and he cleared out the garage. He's got a space to make the Pinewood Derby car. And the little boy's, I don't want to do it this year. And Dad, of course, was heartbroken, but he was in tune to the fact that his son had totally pulled back. And so he tried to connect and then redirect. And he said, well, last year we had such a good time. I'm wondering what's going on. And slowly but surely, the little boy reminded Dad that the little boy had taken the knife that they had used to help carve the wood to the woods with his friend. And his friend had gotten cut. And they ended up at the hospital, and they had to have stitches. And so the little boy doesn't want to do the Pinewood Derby because he forgot about everything in there. He just remembered the implicit memory of this was the knife, and he got hurt, and I'm not going to do Pinewood Derby this year. So Dad, again, helped him to re-story and retell it, and Dad filled in the blanks when he needed to. But when they finally got through it, and Dad acknowledged what he was feeling, the little boy was scared, and that maybe that had not been the best decision, and helped him to see how we were going to do it this year. And he was really excited to do Pinewood Derby. So we have to help our kids connect our implicit memories and the explicit memories. And sometimes we can do that with a fast forward. Like if you, we have Netflix and we have Amazon Prime, and video recorders and tape players have kind of gone from a thing of the past. But as parents, I hope we remember, you could fast forward to this place, or you could rewind to see this part of the story again. And that's kind of what we want to do with our kids. Fast forward, we have this Pinewood Derby coming up in March. But rewind, I use that pocket knife unsafely, and I'm scared. So let's play it slowly. Let's rewind it back to here, and let's just go slow the speed down, and step by step. What happened last year that you're scared of happening this year? Similarly to the little boy that was afraid to go on his bike ride because he got hurt the last time he did. But you just fill in those blanks and help the child to integrate the right brain with the left brain, the lower brain with the upstairs brain, and make sense of his world. The memory is a wonderful thing. The more we use it, the better it gets. That's why flashcards work when you're learning your timetables. You do it over and over and over. The more we use our brain, the better it is. The brain is it's a miracle, right? It's like it does what our whole body does. Like we have a brain to think and feel. Our eyes have a job, our ears have a job, our stomach has a job, and our brain only works well when it's integrated. We need all of us to work well together. And
as we pause for just a second, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions area and we can answer those. I know it's a lot of really good information.
Yeah, Dan Siegel's book is great, The Whole Brain Child. He's also got another book out. It's called Parenting from the Inside Out. And that's kind of where these memories, we're talking about our kids have implicit memories and explicit memories. But his book, Parenting from the Inside Out, really talks about parenting from our place of childhood. When we talk about our kids get really upset, and sometimes in that moment we need to stop and ask, what's really going on here? Is the way I'm reacting appropriate to what's going on, or is something from my past being triggered? But hold that thought, because I think we have a question.
We do. We have a great question, which is, would be great to know how we can help a sibling help some of these issues when the child is acting up towards them. And I think that's a great point. The way I read Dan Siegel's book, I think teaching these concepts, not only to us as parents, but to each other, is really useful. I think children can learn these as well. From name it to tame it, even just having a language of speaking about how they're feeling and expressing that to each other can be really helpful. And it depends, I think, on the ages as well. Yeah. Sharon, how do you view that?
Well, I think that's where the empathy comes in, right? Sometimes we talk about walking in someone else's shoes. If we can get the siblings to maybe sit down and think about what's going on, maybe turn it around and ask the sibling, what do you think, why do you think your brother feels that way? Or why do you think he might have done that? Or how would you feel if he had done this to you, or vice versa? So getting them to realize that they're feeling the same sort of thing, and knowing that there's so much more similar things going on, right? I was working with a couple kids that were in conflict, and they just knew that the other person didn't like them, and so their actions were working from that point of, it's all about me, and he hates me. And when they actually sat down and talked about why they did what they did, it was a defense. And so we want to engage, because when we're engaging with empathy and eye contact, then we're not defending. We're reacting, we're accommodating. There's actually studies out there that show if you can make eye contact with a bully, then the bullying will kind of wean itself off, or it'll be less, because they're looking at you and they're seeing that you're a real person. I think sometimes our siblings don't even realize that the other one's a person, right? What do you mean you want to play with my toy? That's my toy. No. But if you can make them or help them understand what the other one might be thinking, just role play that. Okay, you be your little brother right now. What's going on in your mind? Maybe that's what he's thinking.
And I think that sounds a lot like the connect and redirect, which of course fits for parents, but I think kids can learn to connect, whether it's a sibling or to a classmate. Group work happens forever, not just in school. It happens as projects in the professional world. And so getting a chance to connect first really does build those empathy skills, and then kind of moving forward to what the next step is.
Right, and I think that our kids learn language along the way, but they learn how to talk without ever having words, right? And they understand what's going on by watching our facial expressions, our body language. If we have our arms crossed, if we're hunkered down in front of them, if our forehead is wrinkled, that's all body language. We don't even have to say a word, and they know what's going on. And there's a study that said also, I love science, right? Says we're not happy because we smile because we're happy. If you think about it, if you just put a big smile on your face, what are you feeling right then and there? It's like all of a sudden the mood changes, right? Or if you think about that's why breathing works, and especially sometimes we teach our kids to be a star and just stretch it all out, because you're opening up your heart and your your energy is open. When you close it down and you clench it up, then your emotions are tighter and angrier.
Are there any other questions? That was a great one.
Okay, well, I was wondering if we wanted to maybe talk about, like I said, this is a lot of information, and I think it would be helpful if we could actually have experiences that we could share and go back and forth on. We could take each of these and delve in a little bit deeper. We're just trying to give you an overview today. Dan Siegel has 12 strategies. I think we got through 4 or 5. We could go into depth more on those. We could take the ones that we've had and just share how it's worked for us, or how would it work if we were trying to do that. Wondering if this would be something that we would like to do again, or if you have other interests. I think we have a...
Yeah, we've got a poll here. So this could be the first of many webinars that we do. And like Sharon said, we got through a few of what Dan Siegel is talking about, of his 12 strategies. And so we have a poll for those of you who are able to participate here live, to let us know how interested you'd be in another webinar on this topic. Could even be a book club. That's another idea that we've talked. Okay, I think we lost our connection there for a second, but it looks like we are back. So for those of you who are still here, if you have a chance to click on the poll, and I'll give us some feedback about how interested you might be in future webinars of this topic or any other topics. And we thank you for coming and joining us today. Again, this has been recorded and will be distributed. So if there's a piece that you missed, or you really just want to go back and take another look at it, you'll have a chance to do that with the audio recording. And you're welcome to share that as well if some other folks were interested in coming but couldn't be here. And I think, as part of the parenting journey, having a place to talk about these kinds of questions that we may have, and some strategies to use, and really even getting into some specific scenarios. That was such a great question about using these strategies with siblings, because as a family system, a lot of times it's more than just parent-child interactions, and we really want to empower the whole system and give skills to our children, as well as develop our own skills as parents. So we thank you greatly for joining us today. We thank Sharon, Darren greatly for being our expert presenter, and really helping us dive right into these topics. And let's see, as we are closing up here, look for the audio recording. We also have a handout that we will be sharing with you, so you can look back on some of these topics, as well as a handout that Dan Siegel provides as part of his book to look at all 12 of those strategies. Yes, great question. Will you show the slides? We will. Absolutely. That'll be coming as a handout. So you'll receive that along with the recording. Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you again for those of you who are able to attend live, and we hope that those of you who are able to watch this recording are also able to access this information. So if there's anything else we can do to help you, please let us know, and thank you so much. We wish you a wonderful day.